Welcome back to Racing Rundown. This is the first of two previews that we are going to have this week for stakes races stateside this weekend, and this is a preview of the Jim Dandy Stakes at Saratoga. We've got 5 horses lined up for this race. Very excited for this one. We have the 4 best 3-year-olds in training right now, showing up in one race. I don't remember the last time that has happened in a race this time of year, so that's very exciting. To get to this, before we get to any further, though, I will mention we do, in addition to this video, have a preview for the San Diego Stakes, or San Diego Handicap, I should say, at Del Mar. So be sure to check that out. And we'll dive into, or I will also say there's a link to that below in the description. And we're now going to dive into the first horse in this race, and that is Western River. 4th place finisher in the Peter Pan Stakes, and very disappointing that this horse didn't run in the Belmont Stakes. If you remember back to a video that I made after the Preakness, it was something that I was talking about whether or not Nest could win the Belmont Stakes, and I was talking about how short of Western River, I thought Nest was easily built for the Belmont Stakes, but I thought Western River would have been a very good horse for that Belmont Stakes. He's a full sibling to not Tappet, Creator, a son of Tappet, but full sibling to Belmont Stakes winner Creator. The Connections ultimately decided not to run him in the Belmont Stakes. Instead, they ran him at Churchill Downs in a 1.5-mile allowance race, which he did win, but that was certainly not the same type of race as the Belmont Stakes would have been. And that's the big reason why I don't like Western River here, is because in the Peter Pan, he ran such a I need a 1.5-mile type race. And this horse is a absolute pure 1.5-mile type, and I just think this race is too short for him. He needs a 1.5 miles. He's not going to get it here, obviously, and he certainly is significantly weaker than the other 3-year-olds in this race. Even Tawny Port, the 3rd or 4th string horse in this race, he's significantly weaker than even Tawny Port, so he's a relatively easy pass for me in this spot. Now we're going to move on to the number 2 horse in this race, the horse that most folks would say is the best 3-year-old in the country, and that's Epicenter, and I would most likely agree with those folks, except the one thing about Epicenter is Epicenter hasn't won a major race all year. Yes, he won the Louisiana Derby, but he hasn't won a Grade 1 yet this year, and he's been the victim of circumstances in 2 of his races this year. In the Preakness, he got a poor ride from Joel Rosario, and pretty much everybody lauded that ride and talked about how awful it was. And then in the Kentucky Derby, that was just a 1 in 700,000 race. Everything blew up in front of him, and Rich Strike was able to take just basically everything falling into his lap and be able to win the Kentucky Derby there. But Epicenter in both of those races ran very credible runner-up efforts, and I think that he was certainly beaten by circumstance in the Preakness, very much so, also beaten by circumstance in the Kentucky Derby. But that being said, I'm going to take against Epicenter here just because I don't necessarily love the way the race sets up for him. And now, if we're talking about Epicenter using the speed that he has and going back to the way that he ran in the Lecomte and Louisiana, or specifically the Risen Star, not the Louisiana Derby there, but specifically running the way that he did in the Risen Star, going back to being on the lead, then I think Epicenter is the most likely winner of this race if he does that. But I'm not 100% sure that Connections are going to do that. And with that being said, I don't love Epicenter closing in here, and if he's not on the lead, then the clear speed in this race is early voting, and early voting is going to be forwardly placed anyway. But if early voting's alone, then I think that the race could shape up relatively similarly to the way that it did in the Preakness. But Epicenter certainly is very talented and does deserve all the accolades that he's going to get coming into this race. And now we're going to move on to the number 3 horse in this race, and that is Tawny Port. The Ohio Derby winner and the Lexington Stakes winner leading up into the Kentucky Derby. Tawny Port was a very intriguing type for me exiting the Kentucky Derby. I thought that he ran, I talk about it every single year, that really good 7th place finish in the Kentucky Derby. And Tawny Port was very much that kind of horse. He had a good resume going into the Kentucky Derby, was never going to win because he was going to be very overly matched in there. But when he dropped down to the lesser level races, he was going to be able to run really well. And in the case of the Ohio Derby, he took out a victory there. But he's stepping back up in class in this race to the top dogs in here. And I should correct myself earlier. I said 4 of the best 3-year-olds in training. There are 3 of the best 3-year-olds in training, Zandon, early voting, and Epicenter. Tawny Port, I don't think he's the 4th best 3-year-old in training, so I should correct myself there. But Tawny Port has given good accounts of himself in his races, especially when he's run on dirt 2 of his 3 starts. And I think even his Kentucky Derby effort was a very credible effort. That being said, he is up against it in this spot in terms of class. And that's the big reason why I'm going to be against Tawny Port in here. I liked him a lot. I personally bet a good chunk of money on Tawny Port in the Kentucky Derby because I thought he could hit the board. And he obviously didn't there. But I think that it's worth a shot here because there's a good chance that he could split the Chad horses and Epicenter and get a grade 2 placing here. And sure, you could wait a week and run in the West Virginia Derby, but why not get a graded 6 placing here? Maybe you'll outfinish 1, if not 2 of the Chad horses and get a solid 2nd or 3rd place effort in this race. So props to Brad Cox for taking the opportunity to try Tawny Port in this race, even though he probably is up against it in this spot. Now we're going to move on to the number 4 horse in this race, and that is the Preakness winner, Early Voting. And Early Voting, as I mentioned, you're kind of indicated, he's the horse that I like in this spot. I think Early Voting is going to be the controlling speed in this race just because I don't know what they're going to do with Epicenter, and I don't want to trust Epicenter going back to the front end on this spot. And even so, even with Epicenter in this race, Early Voting ran a very, very good race last time in the Preakness. Very good effort in the Wood Memorial to start. Before that, and Mo Donegal came back and crushed him in the Belmont Stakes. So obviously the form that Early Voting has been in this year has been extremely flattering. You go back even to his effort in the Withers earlier on this year. I was wrong on how I read the Withers, as was everybody else. Most of us thought that it wasn't a good effort. And subsequently, it comes back, and it was a very, very good effort for Early Voting in that Withers Stakes. Chad Brown has spotted this horse right, taken the time with Early Voting, and even though he's only got 4 starts coming into this race, he is all set to run a very, very big race in this Jim Dandy Stakes. He's going to be my win pick here, and I'll get more into that when I get to the picks portion of this video. But right now, I think he holds a tactics advantage. And I think, these 3 are relatively even in terms of talent, and I think tactics will dictate what happens in this race. And now we're going to move on to the final horse in this race, and that is number 5, Zandon, the 3rd place finisher from the Kentucky Derby. I liked Zandon a lot in the week leading up to the Kentucky Derby. Ultimately did not pick him. It came down to, when I picked just giving you an insight to how I picked the Kentucky Derby this year. I came down to 3 horses. Obviously, my pick, White Barrio, Smile Happy, and Zandon was the 3rd horse out on there. So I liked him in the Kentucky Derby, but I ultimately thought his Bluegrass win was getting a little bit oversold, and I may have dogged him a little bit too much in hindsight in the Kentucky Derby preview video. But he ran a credible effort in the Kentucky Derby, but he did hang down the stretch, and that's the thing that has me a little bit concerned about him. However, he is shortening back up to 1 mile and 1/8 in this race, and he has proven in his 3 races leading up into the Kentucky Derby that 1 mile and 1/8 is no problem for him. Should have been put up in the Remsen Stakes. That was a very good runner-up effort for him. And me and everybody else out there believes that he should have been put up from the victory in there, or put up and gotten the victory in there. Weird effort in the Risen Star. That I wonder if that was just a layoff thing and he needed to start in there. Good effort in the Bluegrass, a very good race there. Didn't have as much traffic as everybody thought he did, but still ran very well there. And he did run good in the Kentucky Derby. Again, if circumstances didn't happen in there and it just absolutely falling into the lap of Rich Strike, Zandon is the runner-up in the Kentucky Derby. So he ran really well there in his own right. I'm not picking him here just because I think Early Voting is a tad bit better. And again, tactics. That's the big thing with me in this race. And I'll get to the picks portion of this now. Tactics are the thing that I'm picking this race on. I think that Early Voting is going to be the controlling speed. I think you'll see Zandon and Epicenter relatively close to each other, and then Tawny Port relatively close to them. So they're not going to be separated by all that much, at least the 4 horses that I think are going to be relevant in this race. But I think Early Voting potentially gets to jump on these horses, is able to be about a length and a half in front of them in the earlier portions of the race. Now, again, if Joel Rosario does decide to put Epicenter in the game early, then that makes me more nervous about Early Voting, but I am still going to stick with Early Voting in there. Early Voting with Epicenter splitting the 2 Chads, it's really kind of a formality with the trifecta because it's one iteration of the 3 best horses in the race, at least how I see it. I like Tawny Port, but I don't like him enough to be top 3 in this race. So that's how I'm picking the Jim Dandy. Be sure to stay tuned for Racing Rundown. We'll have a preview for the San Diego Handicap at Del Mar later on tonight, preview for that. And if you're watching this before Thursday morning, be sure to check out the preview that we had for the Nassau Stakes on Racing Rundown Around the World at Goodwood. We'll see you for that stuff. Have a good one.